Okay, so then we can have a slow introduction. We can start together. First, let me thank you, each and every one of you, for coming here today, and also for whoever is going to watch the record of today's presentation. And as you already know, the presentation is about Sikkim moving landscape, which I made specifically after writing a paper which has been published in June, so during this summer or July. And I'm going to start very soon, but first I would like to stimulate our imagination together, because we're going to talk about something which is somehow paradoxical, right? We're going to address something which we will refer as the landscape, which is something fixed, unmovable, which is not able to move by definition. But paradoxically, we are also going to address it as something which is moving. So before starting, I made a quick research to present you with two examples from fiction, from popular fiction animation, to get accustomed and acquainted with the idea of something which is very difficult for us to imagine. Maybe some of you already are familiar with this. This is Howl's Moving Castle, a movie from Studio Ghibli, director Hayao Miyazaki of the early 2000s. And the reason why I'm showing you this is because I think this is somehow relevant for us to start imagining how a moving landscape can move. So in this case, is a man-made castle, so something which is not supposed to move at all and stay in the same place for centuries, for decades, for a very long time. But at the same time, as we can see, it's also able to move, wandering, never twice in the same place. But as I already said, this is something man-made. The second example maybe can be better to imagine something which is more relevant to our discussion. This is a frame I took from another popular animation series from the first decade of the 2000s, Nickelodeon production. The name of the series is Avatar: The Last Airbender. And the producers were familiar with the Eastern Asia mythology. And in this case, what I'm showing you is a fictitious character, an animal which is a chimera between a lion and a turtle, which is so big, as you can see, that it has a ravine, woods, growing on the shelf. But at the same time, it's not just nature, but it's also civilization. That is a very big town, I wouldn't say village, but either way, a human settlement. So the human settlement, it's not in the landscape as we know it, but it's on top of the shelf of this mythical creature. And both are wandering, never stopping, never twice in the same place. So now that maybe our imagination is ready for a concept that it's a little bit difficult to grasp, we can start with the actual presentation. A short introduction about who I am and what I do, so we can give a little context about this. I've been studying in Venice, Foscari University of Venice, both for my bachelor degree and master degree. Topics were different during my bachelor years. I've been a student in Japanese studies, and I graduated with a thesis about Yakuza, so Japanese criminal organizations. Afterward, from 2019 to 2022, I have been a student of cultural anthropology, and I graduated with a thesis about Sikkim, which we are going to discuss briefly. And from 2023 to today, I've been admitted into the Ruprecht Karl University of Heidelberg as a PhD student, so in cultural anthropology in the Faculty of Cultural and Behavioral Studies. Since I'm still working on it, I don't have a very long list of publications, papers. I just have two publications so far. The first one is from 2022, and it's about the Japanese ghosts and the Japanese horror stories of the Kaidan genre. And the second paper, which is the one we are presenting today together, is about Sikkim moving landscape towards non-human agency scenarios for the future, which you will find at the end of the presentation, I put just website link if you want to go and read it yourself. So, finally, we can get started about this. Why am I interested in the moving landscape? Because I've been conducting ethnographical field in Sikkim for approximately 1 month in May 2022. Timing wasn't actually very good because it was just after the coronavirus pandemic, so there were a lot of restrictions, both health restrictions, travel restrictions. It wasn't absolutely allowed to travel, and I had to wait the first chance I got to actually organize everything. Originally, I wasn't even supposed to be in my field area, which has been Western Sikkim, but I was supposed to go to the northern region of Sikkim, the name of which is Jonggu. But since it's a restricted area, and normally it wouldn't be a problem to get access, to get permission to access. But again, because of coronavirus pandemic, there were some challenges, and being this part of the anthropological experiences, I had myself to relocate. And at the end of my research, I've been experiencing three main sites. So 3 main fields. The first one, and most important, I would say, is Yuksam in Western Sikkim, the first capital of Sikkim, royal capital of Sikkim. Then Gangtok, which is the actual capital of Sikkim. And then Pelling, which is a town located again in Western Sikkim, and it is also the closest one to Kechopari Lake, which is very important to today's discussion. I put some picture to give you a little bit more of context. On the left picture, you can see the Namgyal Institute of Tibetology in Gangtok, which is, as you can probably understand, the main site for Buddhist studies, and it is also where I could meet one of the most important researchers and scholars about Sikkim, Dr. Anna Balikci, which was helpful in giving me all the information I needed, also for site relocation. And on the right, on the top corner, you can see this is a picture of Gangtok. So Gangtok is a town built on top of the hill. And on the bottom right corner, you can see Kechopari Lake, which has a very remarkable shape, which someone addressed as the footprint of a goddess. So, I already told you that the reason why I was interested in Sikkim was for collecting data and findings for my master's degree and graduate. Why I chose Sikkim? I was interested into the Himalayas, and especially if I had to define my field of interest, I would say the Buddhist context, Buddhist countries, shamanism, environmental issues, meaning everything which could be somehow relatable or pertinent to the environmental ontology and the works of the scholars, for example, in the ontological term field. And then I found Sikkim, and I decided to have my ethnographic field there. After studying on the academic literature that was already available to me, I had some expectations. For example, I was reading the work of Dr. Balikci, and I was very interested in the way she defined the relationship between the Buddhist communities of Sikkim and the villages where the Lepcha shamans were working almost together. she addressed this as a shared worldview. So it's not different representations of reality, but the same reality shared by two different parties and experienced in two different ways. At the same time, another scholar defined this shared worldview as an ancient apotropaic and non-soteriological matrix based on a pre-Buddhist cult. And one of the researchers working here at Tartu University, Dr. Kikidoma Bhutia, she has addressed the relationship between the human and non-human communities of Sikkim, especially among the Bhutias or Lopos, as a mutuality of beings. And again, between my expectations, what I was interested in and thought I was going to find, I was interested into the environmental virtue ethics and issues related to environmental ontology altogether. I would briefly talk about the methodology and the actual results, because I think it is important to be clear what I achieved and how I worked. So 1 month is absolutely the bare minimum, I would say, and other people would say, for doing ethnographic field. But as I already told you, the conditions were not good. It was just after coronavirus pandemic, and it was the best it could be made. So I had no choice but to rely on qualitative research, meaning I made use of unstructured individual interviews, as many of them as I could. Of course, I relied on triangulation of sources. I made use of some of these interviews. I would say I made use of informants, but this is not a term I'm fond with, but for the presentation's sake, let's use informants. And at the end of my research, luckily, somehow, I was able to document that there is actually some kind of relationship between the spiritual landscape of Sikkim, the animated landscape, and the actual material, physical, environmental landscape. And we can make notice of this relationship because non-human agents have been actually shaping the local community's future, meaning that they exert a kind of influence on what the local community do, for example, in tourism, or farming activities, perception of farming activities. They actually shape the ethics, how the local communities exploit the landscape. Now, this is something that I even ask myself, and I think even other people are going to ask it. Why does it matter studying or knowing something about the moving landscape? I think it is relevant in different fields of knowledge. It could be helpful in dealing with ecology. It could be helpful in defining new terms of nature. It can somehow be relevant to environment in all different subjects of studies. But finally, the most important that I could think, at least for me, is a useful tool, because it helps defining the multi-species relationship, and it can also be made use in the Anthropocene studies, because it may help us in rethink the ways in which human groups interact with non-human agents. Now, we can actually give a definition of what a moving landscape is. So, we can define the moving landscape as a category of short narratives belonging to the religious folklore of the Himalayas, in this case, of course, Sikkimese, that deal with the idea of physical and spiritual contamination of a place recognized for its particularly sacred qualities, perpetrated by human beings. In response of these acts of corruption and pollution, these sites undergo drastic transformation, often resulting in unfortunate or even tragic outcomes for humans. So, in my paper and during my field, one of the most, if not the primary example of moving landscape is Kechopari Lake. Luckily, there is some reference that could be found in academic literature about this. Not so many, if I have to be honest, but still it's better than nothing. So I already told you where Kechopari Lake is. It's in West Sikkim, near a village named Pelling. And the reason why this is a very important place is that it is believed that the water of the lake have some miraculous properties, especially healing properties, meaning that Buddhist devotees, Hindu devotees, all people from all over India and the Himalayas will go on a pilgrimage to the lake to try to have some kind of beneficious effect on their bodies. There are several versions of the myth of the lake. The one I could document, let's say, around 3, more or less. The reason why I cannot be more specific is that 2 are very similar and 1 has been given to me directly on the field, so let's say 3 for the presentation's sake. But the common thread around all the different accounts of this story is that there is focus on the purity, respecting the purity of the lake, not just as a spiritual place, but also as a physical environment. And these are the references I could find in the academic literature, 3 different examples, Evershed and Fish from 2006, Jay in 2004, and Raman in 2 instances, 2015 and 2019. Now, getting to the accounts. As you can see, the accounts are very similar. The main story is about 2 sister lakes somewhere around the northwestern part of the Himalayas. At a certain point in time, the younger lake will move into the western part of Sikkim, and it is agreed that this place where the lake will move will be Yuksam. But the people in Yuksam will start acting disrespectfully towards the lake, meaning that they will deposit waste into the lake's water. This will enrage the lake, or the lake spirits, if it is easier to understand, and the lake spirits or goddess or luminous entity will move to another site and again to another location till reaching its actual abode, which is the lake of Kechopari. I was lucky, I think, because in Yuksam there is a small monastery. The name of this monastery is Dubdi Monastery, which is arguably the oldest monastery in Sikkim, up on a small hill. And I had the chance to speak several times with the head lama of the monastery. The name of the lama is Lama Shering. And I was lucky because he gave me his own version of the lake with the of the moving landscape account with the focus on Yuksam Lake. There is a small lake in Yuksam. The name of this lake is Katok. And according to Lama Shering account, this is the previous location where the goddess of the lake chose to locate itself before moving to Kechopari. And he basically gave me the same story, saying that the spirit was displeased by the actions of the local people because they were polluting the lake, and so the lake suddenly moved overnight, searching a more suitable space. Of course, the focus of this story, as you can probably already imagine, is about purity, impurity, and the world-shaping power of corruption, meaning that morally impure actions will have consequences, real, actual, pragmatic consequences in reality. So, in order to avoid to enrage again the spirit of the lake, it is necessary to keep the surrounding environment, meaning the forest and the lake's water, of course, pure and immaculate. But at the same time, it is also necessary that the pilgrims, everyone who gets close to the lake, the devotees, will exhibit a proper behavior, meaning they approach the lake with purity in heart, mind, and actions. So finally, I can show you what we are talking about. Both the picture on the left and the picture on the right upper corner, they are, I took them myself in Yuksam, that is Katok Lake, which is very small but also very nice. And on the bottom right corner, that is a picture I took myself in Kechoparri. As you probably understood before, there is a hill near Kechoparri, so it is possible to take pictures both from the above and on the ground level. So it's not really possible to talk about the moving landscapes and Sikkim, generally speaking, without first introducing what Beyul Dremojong is and how relevant he is to this topic. So, all over the Himalayas, Sikkim is considered by Tibetan Buddhism to be a Beyul. What's the meaning of Beyul? A consecrated land by the passage of Tantric Master Guru Rinpoche or Padmasambhava, which is the figure that you can see in this picture. Actually, we can try to give some definition to Beyul, but as Dr. Bhutia has already made evident, the concept is somehow open, remains open to theoretical exploration. What I mean is that it's possible to give multiple interpretative possibilities. We can define Beyul as a hidden valley. We can talk about a paradise accessible only to the pure, or, generally speaking, a dimension of peace and bliss. But what's most important in this context, when we talk about Sikkim and Beyul, is that the land will be consecrated, will have blessing and protection, only as long as the devotees will show devotion and respect, meaning that the thankings to Guru Rinpoche or Padmasambhava, to the Tantric Master, shall be renewed each year. So, the consequences of Padmasambhava or Guru Rinpoche's in Sikkim are huge, and I think they are very relevant to the topic of the moving landscape because they shaped the relationship with the non-human agents and entities of Sikkim. What Padmasambhava did was inscribing the animated sacred landscape existing before Buddhism arrived in Sikkim, and of course the many beings living in Sikkim, human and both human and non-human, within Buddhist cosmology, creating what is actually a sacred topography. So he created a new order, he brought a new order into the animated landscape, meaning that the overwhelming and somehow disorderly powers of nature could be recomposed, could be brought within the moral order of Buddhism. So we can make a distinction and identify a pure landscape on two levels. The internal level is so spiritual and moral, and an external level. So a beautiful landscape, an orderly landscape, landscape, a sacred topography will be reflected both on the external and internal reality as something pure and immaculate, whereas pollution will be seen both on the external and internal level as something which will degrade the beauty of the landscape. Of course, this dichotomy, as you can see, is very important, especially in the Bayeux context, purity versus what is polluted or corrupted. And the other consequence of Padmasambhava's action in Sikkim and in shaping the Bayeux Dremojong is that his teachings are very important still again today, because the Tantric master understood of flexibility and adaptability, meaning that the sacred text of Buddhism can be interpreted every time with a new understanding depending on the needs of the different era in which the devotees live. Now, we'll be talking about Buddhism. Let's take a step back and focus on some other topic like modernization, tourism, and pollution. Sikkim is an inter-Himalayan hotspot. It's a tourist destination. There are lots of people going in Sikkim from India, from the Himalayas, from the nearby countries, which are, for example, Bhutan and Nepal. And the residents, at least the one I met in Yuksam and Gantok, or even the entrepreneurs, they are very aware of the economic value of the land. They know they can exploit the land for tourism, but at the same time, they know they have to keep a balance with the environment. They can't act too aggressively towards it. There can't be uncontrolled development and uncontrolled tourism. So there is the need, on the one hand, to extract the resources or services needed for the individual survival, but at the same time there is the desire to try to respect this balance and not to bring an uncontrolled development. Why is uncontrolled development so dangerous and something which should be avoided? Because there are already records of some of the consequences and results which are very bad. A few examples you can see here. There is the slow erosion of the soil, the slow erosion of biodiversity, and fewer hotspots. There is an increase in waste production. There are some changes in the weather pattern, precipitation pattern, very unusual for the local environment. And generally, there is some kind of concern that the attitude of the Sikkimese towards the landscape and environment might change, especially if we confront this problem between different generations, the older generations and the newest ones. We had in the past a few examples of massive anthropogenic interventions with different reactions. For example, in 1958, there was the Gantok-Mangan Highway building. And in order to do so, of course, it was necessary to destroy part of the hill, go through with cementification of the soil, a massive anthropogenic intervention that the local inhabitants absolutely didn't like, because they thought that it was they were going to address the rage of the non-human entities, especially the gods and spirits living in the land. Or again, from 2007, for approximately 1 decade, there was a massive work of building dams all over Jonggu, so meaning in the northern part of Sikkim, which is also a very how should I say? It's a restricted area. It's a restricted area, and it's very difficult to do anything there. So normally the government, the local government, has been trying to be as less invasive as possible. But because of these interventions, the local population was very upset for the same reasons as the Gangtok-Mangan highway construction. And generally, what we can infer from this reaction is that the non-human agents have actually been exerting some kind of influence on what the human communities do. This is not something new, however. We have some example of environmental taboos, meaning that the animated landscape is something which is still alive in the common everyday life of local people. I was able to record some of that myself. You could find some examples in my paper. We can discuss about it later in detail. And another way that is useful for us to understand how the non-human agents influence the perception of the local inhabitants is, for example, through surveys or even interviews about how the local farmers perceives any change in climate pattern, so influencing farming soils, farming activities, and all kind of activities related to primary production. So the moving landscape is something very, how should I say, is useful for showing the ecosystemic interconnections. It can be useful for the multi-species relationship. But if we want to address it in a more technical way, I would say it is a tool, a useful tool, fitting ecological and anthropological theories concerning agency, non-human and human agencies, and relationship between human and non-human communities. Why is it useful? Because it provides a tangible example and illustration of the interrelationship between agencies. And ultimately, it is helpful in rethinking the relationship that the modern society has had with the environment and still has, as long as we think about the dichotomy at the foundation of modern society between a subject of knowledge and an object of knowledge, between human beings and nature. So, what the moving landscape shows us is the model of a nature that can actually pack up and leaving human beings behind to deal with the consequences of their actions. So it creates the image of a nature that compels us to confront the very idea of humanity we have and the violent contradictions of a cultural model, as we said, dichotomy between human being, the active subject of knowledge, and nature, the passive object of knowledge, which is hegemonic and hardly sustainable anymore. And of course, it compels us to stop and think about what's left, meaning thinking about the non-human forces, which are actually active and can be behind future changes. I would like to conclude with a quotation from Bruno Latour. The animated landscape that emerges in the moving landscapes is a community of non-human agents representing characters invisible to the human eye, yet active and mobile, capable of reorganizing everything around them, just like humans, because this is a general ability of living beings. Now, as I have already hinted, I made this presentation a little bit shorter compared to what you are probably used to, but I wanted to leave some time for us for questions. If you have any question about the paper, which you can also find online whenever you feel like reading it. Maybe you would like to know more about some information and details that I didn't have, that I didn't put inside the presentation, but I would stop here for now, and I would leave you the space for any inquiries you feel you would like to ask. And of course, thank you for coming here and listening to me.
Thank you very much.
That's Okay. The easiest way to define non-human agencies is actually getting yourself involved with the local community in the way that you can actually experience part of their everyday life, meaning their job, their thoughts, their daily activities. And I will make you an example. There was one time I had the chance to go and talk with the Lepcha shaman. Lepcha is one of the two autochthonous group or ethnic group of Sikkim. The other one being Bhutia or Lop. And the shaman, I couldn't unfortunately speak directly to him because I didn't have the language skills, so I had to rely on some help from another Lepcha community member. And he was talking about the kind of reaction they need to have when working in the middle of nature. For example, something for us which is very usual is for example, seeing a crop field and just walk around the crop field. We don't think anything special about it. But for Lepcha people, for example, if they are walking across the crop field, they are going to be very cautious because it means that they are leaving the space of their home village and they are walking inside a space which is not their home anymore, but it's part of the landscape where other entities live, meaning that the crop itself is a living entity. So, for example, some of them told me that they had casual or unexplained rush just walking among the crop fields. And the way they see this, careful not interpret, but see this, is actually the non-human entities showing some kind of, let's say, upset behavior because the humans didn't think and stop and ask for permission to get inside the crop field. So, related to tourism, related to tourism, we can say that every time human beings are doing something in a space which is not usually occupied by humans, they need to be very careful. So this is the answer I would give you, but I'm not sure 100% that I was able to answer your question maybe the way you thought I was going to answer it. Okay, this is better. The distinction for us is somehow shaky, confusing, because we are trying to make two different categories. But when I was there and I had the chance to speak with, for example, Yuksam residents, for them it wasn't this black and white distinction. It's something more fluid. So it also depends on the intergenerational differences. The older generation, they are going to be somehow a little bit more wary, and the younger generation, they're going to be a little bit more nonchalant. So I think it really depends also on more urbanized areas and rural areas. But thank you, because I understand that this feels somehow familiar for me, and it is important to try to explain this better to someone who is not accustomed to this kind of topic.
Thank you very much. And my question probably follows the previous question that what we are dealing with, and some of my topics they related to non-human agents and to local technologies or in your version and so on, but it's very much related also on language or languages. So what we also call taxonomies, and these relations of human and human and quite a complicated relations sometimes to distinguish from outside and related to really different agendas inside. Sometimes they're visible in a language, in a English language, in a naming, in the notions of, let's say, the spirits or entities to be more abstract in this way. Push it somewhere. What kind of languages you used for your research? What languages are involved? How you
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, this is another important aspect that I forgot to address. Sikkim was something somehow unexpected, something which I happened to meet in my life. So, of course, I didn't have any kind of specific language skills related to Tibetan dialects or to local dialects. For example, I wasn't able to communicate in Bhutia language or Lepcha language, meaning that the only option available to me was English, which was fine in 97% of the time, but of course sometimes in more specific situation like the shaman example I just made, it wasn't the best and I had to rely on the help of someone else. So this is definitely something which should be improved if I go on further with the research, but basically English.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You are very brave in your research because based on my experience, I can say that there are at least 5 names, so 5 local ethnic terms for entity which can be related to local landscape, and each of them brings really a lot of additional meanings and referring to different categories, starting from divinely and kind of benevolent to humans, let's say, and totally an opposite. So, yeah. Any other comments, questions?
I have one actually, because in the previous questions you have mentioned shamans, and this kind of connects to the question that I asked to Kiki as well yesterday. But like, how would you define the relationship? No, sorry. Maybe it's better to ask it this way. What is the connection you have found between shamans and the idea of moving landscapes that you have found? Like, is there any connection in the first place? And how would you elaborate on that? Sorry if the question sounds too generic.
No, absolutely. Thank you. So I already thank you for the question, because I was already going to give some kind of answer to that. My research is very theoretical, meaning that I make a huge use of academic literature, Buddhist literature, folk tale stories, And what I'm trying to do is understand if how the theoretical aspect is going to have some kind of performative effect in reality. Meaning that for some part of my theories, I've been leaning heavily on Buddhist studies. On Buddhist studies, for example, we've seen together Beyul Dremojong, which gave us the idea of the moving landscape. But if we are talking about shamans, there is less theory and I would say much more reality, meaning that if you're going to talk with a lepcha shaman, the lepcha shaman will answer your question, but most of the questions I asked, they were a little bit too abstract for him to completely grasp. So I had to ask the question, trying to get rid of my anthropological assumption about what I was going to ask and make it really simple, and then trying to gain some interpretation about the data he was giving me. So if you're talking about lepcha shamans, they will just tell you that the land itself is made by other entities, other beings, which we can define human or other than human. And they don't have especially the idea of a moving landscape, but what they have is the idea that if they are going to do something which will enrage the spirits living in it, the spirits will be furious, making life for human beings very miserable. So even if they don't share the same exact concepts, the actual result is basically the same, because they both belong to an environment, the Tibetan environment, which is very harsh and aggressive for human life, especially in the previous times. So they experienced the same environment and came to what Dr. Balikshi defined as a shared worldview. This is the best kind of answer I can give you without getting too much theoretical. I hope that is somehow easy to understand.
That's fine.
Okay. Thank you.
You could go even more theoretical for me, that's not a problem, but
yeah. I've been told that sometimes I'm a little bit too theoretical and that I should stick to what we can see and know without getting too much abstract. Yeah. But thank you for your question.
If no more questions or comments, then we can pass the Alessandro.
Thank you. Thank you.